Privacy and data protection in studies, based on regulation on the privacy and data protection of natural persons with regard to the processing of personal data. This presentation focuses on privacy and data protection, especially in the learning processes in higher education. The presentation is a part of the eAMK project. My name is Jori Leskelä and I work as a principal lecturer in professional teacher education at Tampere University of Applied Sciences. In this video, I will first describe the starting point of the new privacy policy and the requirements imposed by the regulation on organizations. Then I will concentrate on the rights of a registered, in this case, the rights of a student. Why did we need a new EU-wide data protection regulation? The new EU-wide data protection regulation GDPR came into force in May 2018. In short, the effects of the GDPR can be summarized in 5 points. The regulation increases and tightens the responsibilities of the controller of the personal data. It gives more rights to the registered. It harmonizes the processing of personal data within the EU. It increases the transparency of the processing of personal data. And the regulation also responds to the challenges of personal data issues in technological development and globalization. The right to handle personal data is strictly regulated. There are many requirements on the registrar. One of the starting points is that the controller must only deal with such personal information that is necessary for the purpose. Collected data must be minimized and their use limited to the purposes for which they are collected. It is also important that only a very limited number of workers have access to the data. Only those whose work requires it. The key point is that the processing of personal data must always have a legal basis. Concerning educational institutions, the legal grounds are, in particular, data subjects' consent to store personal data, statutory obligation to collect personal data. This is particularly emphasized in educational institutions. Or fulfillment of a contract, for example, employment contract. In the case of consent, special attention must be paid to how the consent is asked for. Consent shall indicate the voluntary, individualized, conscious and unambiguous intention of the registered person to accept the processing of his or her personal data. The controller has an obligation to point out, that is, it must be able to demonstrate that the data protection principles are followed in all stages of the processing of the personal data. For example, an organization should describe what personal data is in its possession. how data protection principles have been taken into account, personal data flows related to the operations, the legal basis for processing personal data, and how security has been taken care of. The registrar must make a register statement describing, for example, the purpose of processing, the collection of personal data groups collected, the transfer of data, transfers to other countries, as well as description of technical and organizational security measures. The registry administrator must also carry out a thorough assessment of the risks of processing personal data. What are the rights of a registered, and especially the rights of a student? First of all, students have right to ask information on the processing of personal data. To this right, the institution can either react on its own initiative, in accordance with the so-called transparency principle, by sharing information with students or responding to a request made by a student. The controller shall provide the data subject in a tightly presented, transparent, easily understandable and accessible form. Information on the measures taken at the request of a data subject should be provided without undue delay and no later than 1 month after the receipt of the request. 1 month also applies when controller informs the registered the reason why the controller does not intend to make the action requested by the registrar. In this case, the registrar must also indicate the available remedies available to the registrant. For example, the right to appeal to the supervisory authority. Information provided at the request of a data subject is, in principle, free of charge. The new privacy and data protection policy emphasizes that the student has the right to check what kind of personal data is stored about the student. This means that the student has the right to access the data. Students must also be informed of their rights and be provided the contact details of the data protection supervisor and the appeal instructions. The registered has also right to rectify of his or her personal data. According to the GDPR, the registered also has other rights, but they are hardly related to studies. For more information, please familiarize yourself with GDPR. The official journal of the European Union. In the official journal of the European Union, you find the full 88-page GDPR regulations. Just Google Regulation 2016/679. In each educational institution has its own instructions and processes. Take a look at them. The data protection supervisor at your institution is the key person in data protection matters. Please note that some of the data protection and privacy requests may be subject to a charge. Thank you for your interest in privacy and data protection in studies.